Hello everyone, in this Blender video tutorial we will be modeling a weapon known as a flail. Let's begin by adding a circle with 64 vertices. In edit mode, fill this circle with a face. We're gonna grab 8 vertices. Spread apart evenly. 5, 6, 7, 8. Here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. With proportional editing enabled and a sharp fall off, I'm going to scale up those vertices. Get an 8 branch star. Like this, grab it, extrude it along the z-axis. Now we're going to fill the normals so it looks better and use a smooth shading. Now we're going to split this mesh in 3, but maybe scale it up a bit more along the z-axis. This. Now in the top section, I'm gonna create 7 loops. Make sure to work with this box here white so you grab all the vertices and not just the ones that are visible. I'm gonna scale those vertices along the X and the Y axis. This. Now over in the second section, again add 7 loops. Mark this loop 7 as a sharp, but it's only a visual reminder to know which one is the middle loop. I'm gonna grab the 3 middle loops and scale them up on the X and Y axis. Now let's grab the middle loop again in loop tools. I'm gonna make it a circle with an influence of 100 and scale it up again. Grab these 2 loops, circle, but this time influence of 80%, so we've got a smoother transition from a star-shaped loop to a round loop. Now these again circle, but this time drop influence to 60%. Scale them up a bit along the X and Y axis. Now we're gonna cut faces along those loops. So here, I'm gonna cut a total of 8 faces. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Like this, and we're gonna do this 8 times. It's a good idea to go into the preferences and set the rotation of the scene to 45 degrees per pressing of the 6 key on the numpad, so that your model rotates 45 degrees at a time. If you haven't done that, I recommend doing this, at least for this model. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, now that we've cut 8 faces, going to extrude them. However, we're gonna only pick 4 of them at a time. If we pick all 8, this will not work. Make sure to grab all the small faces. Like this. Now extrude and scale along the X and Y axis. Like this. I'm gonna use a normal orientation with individual origin. Scale them up to 0 along their Z-axis. We're going to dissolve those faces. Now we can only grab one face at a time. And then we're gonna do the same thing for the other 4 faces that we've cut. Right, we got them all, so again, extrude and scale along the X and Y axis. And scale them down to 0 along their normal Z-axis. Move them up and dissolve faces. Move them up along their Z-axis so they're even with the others. I'm gonna select all of them. I'm gonna scale them up along the Z-axis so that they look like squares. They're a bit big, so I'm gonna scale them down like this. Now, one at a time, I'm going to rotate it over them 30 degrees along the y-axis so that they're pointing up. I'm going to select all 8 faces. Move them up a bit so that they're really pointing up. I'm gonna extrude them a few times. With proportional editing enable and a sharp fall off. Transform orientation normal and individual origins. We're gonna scale them up on the X and Y axis like this, so they become bigger. I'm gonna extrude them one last time and scale this to 0. And we're gonna merge all these vertices with collapse. Now's a good time to add a Bevel Modifier with angle limit method and a subdivision surface modifier with 2 subdivisions. We're gonna work on the lowest section first. Grab the lowest loop and we're gonna extrude it just a bit. We're gonna work on this section, so add 7 loops again. Select the middle loop, mark sharp, just a visual reminder to know which loop is the middle loop. Grab the 3 loops in the middle, enable proportional editing with a sharp fall off. We're gonna scale them up along the X and Y axis. Gonna scale them up quite a bit, so this section is the largest one in terms of thickness. Gonna round the middle loops a bit. Select the middle one, loop tools, circle, influence of 100 and scale it up. Grab these 2 loops, circle, influence of 80%, scale them up along the X and Y axis. Now again with these 2 loops, circle, influence of 60% this time, scale them up along the X and Y axis. Now we're gonna be drawing faces, or rather cutting, just like we did with the upper section. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, now we're gonna grab the faces that we've cut. 4 at a time, just like we did earlier. Make sure to grab all the small faces. We can apply rotation and scale, and gonna extrude and scale them up on the X and Y axis. I'm gonna scale them down to 0. Oh, the normal Z axis, and dissolve those faces. So I'm gonna do the same thing for the other 4 faces. And extrude and scale along the X and Y axis. And scale them down to 0 along their normal Z axis and move them up. First, dissolve faces. So that they're even with the others. Grab all 8 faces. Scale them up along the Z-axis so that they look like squares. You gotta scale them down a bit. Now we're gonna rotate them 30 degrees along the y-axis so that they point downward. Grab all 8 faces and move them down Z-axis. Now we're gonna extrude them a couple of times. Now, with proportional editing enabled with a sharp fall off, use normal orientation and individual origins, and we're gonna scale them up along the X and Y axis. We're gonna scale them up quite a bit. But the lowest section is the most massive one, and extrude again. And scale to 0. Actually, maybe this is a bit too massive. Gonna grab the loop at the very bottom here, extrude it and scale it down to 0, merge the vertices, and you can save your project if you haven't done so already. Alright, now that we've done the weight, we can start thinking about attaching this weight to an eventual handle. So for this, we're gonna grab the topmost loop, and we're gonna turn it into a circle, 100% influence. And then the second circle, lower the influence to 80. And again here, influence to 60. So that we gradually move from a star-shaped loop to a circle-shaped loop. Now we're gonna delete this face. We're gonna replace it with a grid. I'm going to change the offset so that it's properly aligned. Now let's create one chain link. So add a circle, this time 10 vertices. Grab these vertices and move them up along the y-axis. Set the origin to the center of the geometry. And snap the selection to the cursor. Add a subdivision. Let's select those edges and subdivide them. Add a skin modifier, smooth shading, subdivision, 2 subdivisions. So it's a bit too big. Must fit into this circle here so that we can attach the chain to the weight. So select all vertices and scale them down. Rotate it again along the z-axis. Maybe make it a bit bigger. Now we can apply the first subdivision modifier and the skin modifier. And we can apply this one with one subdivision and apply another one. I mean, add another one. Like this, you can grab those two vertices. We're gonna make them spiky. Scale them up on the y-axis. Now let's add a material to this link. I'm gonna add this material to the weight too. Now we can copy this one. And now let's remove some of those vertices. Let's extrude these along the z-axis. Scale them down to 0 along the z-axis. Move it down. Select the faces. The link will attach to the weight. We're gonna insert a face and make those loops circle loops. Influence to 100, then scale them down. Dissolve faces, move them up along the z-axis. A bit too big, so scale them down. Bring them inside so that they're directly under the loops of the link. And scale them up a bit. Now remove those faces. Now grab both and join them. Actually, I'm gonna add another subdivision here first. Work with the scale again here. So that's about right. Now let's join them. Grab those two loops. Ridge here too. All right. Now we need to create a handle for this weapon. So let's grab this loop here. We're gonna copy it and separate it so it becomes a mesh of its own. We can remove the Bevel Modifier. We're not gonna need it on this one. And we're gonna set the origin to the geometry. Move it about here, a bit away from the weight. I'm gonna extrude it. split it in two like this. Separate them. We're gonna mark these as sharp, just as a visual reminder. Set a smooth shading. Actually mark it as a seam. We're just gonna mark it as sharp. Probably won't change much, but alright, now let's scale these two loops along the X and Y axis. Maybe this is a bit big. Let's copy those, move them down. Scale the bottom part down along the Z-axis a bit. I'm gonna grab this loop and this loop. I'm gonna make them circle with the influence of 100%. This loop and this loop. Circle. Drop the influence to 75%. This loop and this loop. Influence to 50%. Maybe we can move it up a bit. I'll grab those two loops. And we're gonna remove the faces, select them again, and bridge them. So now we've got a nice looking handle. Wield this flail. Now we're gonna need to link this handle to the chain. So let's snap the cursor to the handle, and then this link to the cursor. I'm gonna copy it again here. I'm gonna make this loop a circle with an influence of 100. Now this loop, circle, influence of 80%. This loop with an influence of 60%. I'm gonna delete this face. So let's grab all these vertices and delete them. Maybe this handle is a bit too big. Yeah, that's about right, I think. I'm gonna move this one up a bit, grab those two loops at the bottom, make them circles. I'm gonna extrude them, scale them down to 0 along the Z-axis. We're gonna join this link to the handle. So select the top loop, and we're gonna add a grid. Let's align it properly. Now let's pick the faces that are gonna be attached to the link. Insert a face and make them circles. Alright, so Blender is doing something strange. I'm gonna have to try to work around it. Maybe to sphere doesn't work either. I'll try to do them one at a time. Oh. Okay. Now let's move them up along the z-axis. Add a subdivision here so that both parts have two subdivisions. I'm gonna remove those faces. You can see the loops are a bit too big. So scale them down a bit. And move them to the side so they're directly under the loops of the link. Join them. Bridge here. Not a bridge there. We can bring these two closer together. You can see they're way too big. They don't fit into the camera view. So we're gonna bring them here, make them a bit smaller. And it looks a bit small, so we're gonna make it a bit bigger. And now I'm gonna form a chain to link the handle and the weight. So let's copy this one and rotate this one by 90 degrees along the z-axis. Move it here. Okay. Now I'm gonna duplicate those to form a chain. Try to pay attention to the length of the chain that you're treating, not too long, not too short. Here I'm thinking this might be a little bit on the short side. We can add some more here. Yeah, that looks better like this. Sounds a bit too close to the handle though. Snap the cursor. To the handle. Create an icosphere. Scale it down. Move it here. I'm gonna add a loop here. Another one here. Scale it down. Maybe along the y-axis too. We're gonna add another material to this one. Gonna set its origin to the 3D cursor. We're gonna rotate it. Copy first and then rotate it 90 degrees. Like this. Maybe they're a bit big. Again, set the origin to the 3D cursor, copy, rotate it 90 degrees along with the axis. So we've got 4 circling the handle, and we're gonna copy them a few times. We're gonna serve as a sort of knurling. You can grab this flail and really swing it like this. Now let's add some lighting to this scene. We're gonna add 2 lights. Sunlight and a hemilight. Let's position them about here. We're gonna rotate them so they point at our object. So set the energy of the hemilight to 0.1. The sunlight have an energy of 1, and we're gonna use a ray shadow with 10 samples and a soft size of 0.8, and constant QNC for better quality. Now let's add a plane. Rotate it 90 degrees along the y-axis. I'm gonna move it behind our object and scale it up like this. Now let's grab those three edges and scale it up along the y-axis so that it covers all of the field of view of the camera. And we're gonna extrude these along the x-axis, create some sort of box. Make sure you don't use a top or a face here, because we're using a sunlight and that would block the light from reaching our object. Now let's work on a material for this flail. So in this material, we're gonna set the diffuse intensity to 0.25, specular intensity to 0.1. Add some mirror. The box will be used to create reflections on this flail and also to cast some, or rather receive some shadows to improve photorealism a bit. So reflectivity at 0.1, Fresnel and blend at 2. Let's add some textures. The first texture will be an image texture. I will be placing links into the video description so that you guys can access all the textures I will be using. I'll be using a cast iron texture. It's gonna be a global texture with a cube projection. Now a second texture, it's gonna be a cloud texture, hard noise. Gonna be also a global texture with the cube projection, depth of 24. Gonna set the color to black, enable normal and keep it at 1, best quality view space. Now a third texture, another cloud texture. It's gonna be also a global texture with a cube projection. Depth to 25, 24, and size to 0.45, and make sure the color is black so you don't end up with a purple flail unless you really like purple flails. And always remember to save often. And other textures. The last two textures I will be adding are more optional textures. They're used to add a rust onto this cast iron material so that it has a more worn aspect, but if you'd rather not have this worn aspect, you can just not add those last two textures, but I will be adding them. So a cloud texture, brightness to 0.7, contrast to 1.5, size to 0.75, depth 24. It's gonna be a global texture, this time with a flat projection. I'm gonna uncheck color and check stencil. Now the last texture is also a cloud texture. Set the size to the absolute minimum, depth 24, global texture with a cube projection. I'm gonna check hardness here. The blend will be a linear light blend. Now the color, red 0.507, green 0.409, and blue 0.085. Also a little bit of a brown yellow shade. Now let's see material to the box. You do specular intensity to 0. Very fast. Now let's add a material for the mirroring spheres. Diffuse color. All three at 0.47. Specular intensity 1. It's gonna be a Wardizo shader model with the slope 0.15. Let's add a texture. I'll use this image of a kitchen to create reflections. Set contrast to 2. Saturation to 0.2. It's gonna be a reflection texture with a sphere projection. And that should be alright. Let's go into render. This might take a bit of time depending on how fast your computer is. And let's say that looks pretty good. So this concludes our flail modeling tutorial. If you're interested in watching more 3D modeling tutorials with Blender, please visit my YouTube channel. And until then, happy modeling, everyone.